The Courageous Coaching Podcast is hosted by Sophia Antoine, a certified life coach supporting women in their efforts to improve their self-esteem. Today we're talking about life, relationships, and everything in between. Take it away, Sophia.
Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Courageous Coaching Podcast. I appreciate you greatly. Today I have with us the awesome, the stupendous, my friend from a long time, Raeshal Solomon. She is an author, and she is a woman after my own heart because she talks about money. And she teaches little people money because we need to have financial issues spoken about early in life. But instead of me telling you about her, I'm going to allow Raeshal to introduce herself because she can tell you much better than I can. So again, welcome, and take it away, Raeshal.
Thank you for having me, first of all. Yes, so my name is Raeshal Solomon, and I am an author, as she said, and a speaker. And now I call myself a financial teacher because I focus on teaching kids financial literacy. I actually started this journey personally because I was in over $400,000 in debt, and I was frustrated, and I didn't have much of an income, and I spent a lot of time crying and going back and forth with collectors. So at that point, about 5 years ago, I decided that my kids was not going to have the same financial struggles that I was having. I felt like my struggles was mostly because of a lack of not knowing, not because of a lack of income, because at that moment I didn't have much income. But for many years before, I had been making a really great salary. I just wasn't doing the right things with my money. So I started telling my kids stories about money and writing money books for kids. And so that's how I ended up getting into this industry. But when I started, it was solely just a personal goal for my family and for my household. And then it just kind of spread into a business and a journey for me to go on to teach everyone's kids. So that's how I started the My Little Banker book series. And that's how I ended up meeting Shannon and ended up getting on the project, The Smell of Poverty. So that was the beginning of the process for me.
Awesome. So thank you for bringing that up because you are on the anthology, The Smell of Poverty. We've spoken to many speakers from that project, and I just thought it was so fitting that you were on there because I remember when we first met, you were adamant about just teaching about financial literacy to children. And I know you have children yourself, and I didn't know this backstory about you being in so much debt. And that's amazing. Now I just have even more love for your story. So when you talk to children about money,
yes,
where do you start? I mean, how do they understand it?
Okay, so for me, I always start where they are. So that is one, that is level of understanding, and then two, that is also their age, because a teenager might have their own conceptions of money that a 5 or 6 year old might not have yet.
Right.
So what I do first is I usually start by asking some basic questions, not financial literacy questions, but more like, where does money come from? Just because when it comes to money, is more about a personal perception. So you can ask a 5-year-old where money comes from, and they might say money comes from my mom or dad. And then you can ask a 16-year-old where money comes from, and they might say my mom or dad. You know what I mean? Because nobody ever really truly taught them that money actually comes from a process of work, either entrepreneurship work or you go to someone else's job and clock in. You know what I mean? So there's a disconnect when it comes to kids. So I usually just start off with some simple questions like, what is money? Because you can ask older and younger kids these questions and when you might feel ridiculous asking a 16-year-old or a 10-year-old what is money until you hear their response. And then you might be like, oh, wow, maybe I'm glad I did ask that question. Because some of them might even say, I don't know, or a way to buy the stuff I want to buy. You know what I mean? They don't understand that it's an opportunity for trade. You know what I mean? So really, money is an agreement to trade. You tell me the value you want for this item, and I give you that amount of money, and then you give me the item I want. So money is really a choice. It gives you choices to buy the things that you want to buy. So, that's how I start. So I start with simple questions. What is money? Then where does it come from? How do you get it? And you can ask these questions to your kids at any age and then see their answers. And then from their answers, how, ridiculous or right on point the answers are, then you know where to start teaching. So that's how I started the process. Now I of course I read books. My books, they all have just one money lesson in them. Mm-hmm. And then as the kids learn that one lesson, I ask them questions related to that lesson. Okay. So a lesson might be earning. So I might ask them one question about earning. What does it look like to earn? What does it mean to earn? Give me examples of things you can do to earn money right now, that kind of stuff. And, so it just depends on their answers to the first questions.
Got you. Now, how does this relate, your Little Banker series and The Smell of Poverty? How do those two come together? What attracted you to the project?
Okay, so I felt like The Smell of Poverty was a very attractive project for me because although, everybody in the book had their different backgrounds and how they grew up. Some people actually were poor as kids. Some people, felt it as adults. And I always say, unlike some of the other authors, I didn't grow up poor per se. We were middle class. However, no one ever taught me how to manage money as a kid. So when I became an adult, I made great money and I didn't know what to do with it. So in the book, I talk about the decisions I made as a kid and as a teenager and as a 20-year-old and as a 30-year-old and how it affected me financially at the end of my story. So not the end, but where I am now. So how all those things, those choices I made because I didn't know better choices, how they affected me. And so then it kind of ties into my, you should start teaching your kids at a young age about money, and this is why. But when I started writing the story, it just seemed like a really good project. I had never really truly looked at my story from, as an adult. Like I'm not one of those people who have a book about me out there in the world somewhere. So to do the story actually became very emotional for me. And there's a couple times when I cried while I was writing the story because I was like, oh my God, I went through so much. And you just forget how great you are sometimes.
Exactly.
And how much life you have to live sometimes. There's hardships and stuff. So, yeah, that's how I ended up, the project it was a money topic. And it was talking about something that I was passionate about. And it just, seemed like a perfect project. And it is. It has been, really. It gave me opportunity to reflect back on my life so far.
Okay, so it sounds like it started off as a project that appealed to you because it's in your realm or your scope of practice, but then it turned into somewhat of a healing journey. Is that safe to say?
Yes. It actually did give me a little courage, honestly, because when I wrote those first 700 words without any thought at all, I'm just like, this happened, and then that happened, and then that happened. But you know what I mean? So it just all kind of came out. But when I went back and read it, I was like, wow, I had to overcome a lot. And then I had a little breakdown of, wow, I was impressed by myself because a lot of us we don't take heed to what we've done. and how much, courage we have to show in life and how strong we really are. And so then after I had that little, get in tune with myself, breakdown moment, whatever you want to call it, then I was like, okay, so how do I end such a powerful, impactful story? So then I figured out how to end it. So, yeah. But yeah, you're right. It did. It was.
So you should, because it reminds me, when you say that, it reminds me of that meme that I see floating around. I don't even know if it's a meme or a quote or whatever it is. People do all sorts of stuff with the pictures on the internet, but it's, you never know how strong you are until you have to be strong. And it's like, it comes full circle. We don't give ourselves credit for the wins we do every single day. So, for some people, just getting through a day is a win. And it seems to me, you said coming from $400,000 in debt, that's a win from getting, there to here. I don't know what it looks like now, but it seems like that's a win. Do you give yourself, now that you've put the project to bed, do you kind of give yourself more credit for what you've been through?
Oh, yeah. I do, because, starting off, I wrote the books, the children's books, as kind of like a secret, like I didn't want to be the face of the product per se. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just wanted people to see these cool books and buy them and use them as a tool for their family. But now I find myself telling my story.
Right.
And so I'm like, yeah, I started off with, $400,000 in debt, and now I'm down to my last 40,000, and it's only been 4 years. And,
amazing.
and people are like, wow, I want to know more about you, and what do you do? And you know what I mean? So now I give myself credit. And honestly, writing my story actually helped me a little bit. Because even though it didn't take very long to write the story, reflecting back on it, it makes me want to write the whole story. Because, like when somebody tells you, well, you only have 1,000, you can only write 1,000 words. Or you can only write 1,200 words. You're like, huh? Okay. And at the time when those are just numbers, that sounds like a lot. And then when you look up and you've written 15,000 and 1,500 words, and you're like, oh, wait, I wrote way too much. So then you realize that there's more story in you, and there's, and then you feel like you didn't tell the whole story. So now you're like, oh, wow, okay, I need to do more. So it's led me to believe that I need to do more because, as women or as people, your financial journey is only one journey of your entire life. Right. And it does impact a lot of different parts of your life. Like my parents, they were middle class, but there wasn't a, we don't have enough, but they did have that we are at our limit mentality. So you kind of could feel the squeeze, you know what I mean?
Yes,
when you can't quite get everything you want because you don't have enough. Mm. So with that being said, I only started off with one kid, and I only had my one kid when I was in my 30s because I was like, well, by now my financial situation, is way better than it was, when my parents started in their young 20s having kids. Right. I was like, I don't want to be like them because they didn't have enough, So it's stuff like that. Your financial story does impact your whole scope of life, but that's not your only story. You might be a strong mother, or you might be a great wife, or, you have other parts of you that can be reflected in other stories. So.
Exactly. And just while we were sitting here, I'm taking notes as you're speaking, and I wrote down 400,000 to 40,000 in 4 years. So yes. That's amazing.
Thank you.
You are down to like your last 10% of where you started.
Yes.
You are to be commended. So if you haven't told yourself, I'm going to tell you, girl, you are the shiznit. I'm just saying.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. I mean, and that's part of the reason for the existence of this podcast, because it's easy to just go about your day and not talk about what you do every day because you're on autopilot and you